The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we'll talk about Austin FC's new coach. We'll cover a few contract extensions as well as other contract-related player news. We'll cover the most recent MLS Players Association salary drop and what that means for Austin FC, and we'll cover everything else that's going on with Austin FC. My name's Landon Cottom, and I'm joined as always by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and I will reflect on last week about an hour ahead, 1 week past. We were talking about how, it was probably going to be a slow news week, and we were going to have Marcelo on to do over-under, and none of that stuff happened, and it turned out to be a very newsy week. Well, actually, on last week's show, we were really excited. We got an Obrion contract extension news that gave us like one player thing to talk about, which was what we thought would be more than we might have. Did not turn out that way at all what a week.
Three more extensions after that week, and then a coach hiring on the weekend.
Yeah, so it was definitely a full week. Can't wait to dig into this. So I guess definitely the story of the week is the hire of Austin FC's new coach. So Nico Estevez in. Do you want to? Which one of us should walk sort of through the timeline on this week? So I think we could do the timeline, do instant reactions, and then we can get into sort of all the details after the opening break.
Yeah, I think while I'm thinking about it, let's take a moment to do pronunciation lesson. The accent is on the second syllable. You said it right. You said it right just now.
Okay.
Estevez, Nico Estevez. And then while we're on it, I've complained about British pronunciation of Spanish words before.
Okay.
The head coach of the U.S. men's national team, how do you pronounce his name? And how do you think I'm going to get mad at British people for saying it?
Well, now I don't know. Like, I'm not British, so I feel like I'm evading. It's Pochettino, right?
Yeah, and more the first name.
Mauricio.
It's like in Spanish, it would be Mauricio, which I'm not going to get mad about doing the exact accent, but a lot of British people will say Maurizio and put like a little Italian flair on it, and it makes me angry. But okay, enough of that.
I didn't expect us to go there, Landon.
Nico Estevez hired. Was it Saturday? Is that when we get the announcement?
Friday. It was Friday when we got the official announcement.
Okay. Jeremiah Bentley, you were tipped off about this earlier in the week. You send me a text and say, "Hey, such and such from such and such told me that they're going to hire Nico Estevez," and I think we were both a little bit shocked about it.
I think we were, yeah, because that was the one thing that happened before that was like Tom Bogert. I don't remember what show he was on, but he talked about there were 4 teams in MLS that were in the final stages of hiring their coach, negotiating with their coach, and then that was Tuesday, and then the next day, I got a call from somebody saying that they knew that it was going to be Nico Estevez, and the way it was presented to me is. Actually, there was not a name in there. It was presented to me. This is going to go into my initial reaction as like the guy FC Dallas just fired, who's a Berhalter boy, is going to be the next coach of Austin FC. And I didn't get the name. It didn't take very long. It would take like one Google search to like remember who that was. But yeah, that's the way it was set up to me. So I think we were surprised. I think a lot of people were surprised, and I think a lot of it comes down in a Roto doubling down. In the press conference about like, there's 25 names you wouldn't believe. Are you going to play the clip? Do you have it?
Oh, I don't have. I don't have.
Okay, you don't have that one. Okay,
I should add that to the soundboard.
It should be on the board. And so then to go from that to hearing this particular name, I think was just shocking. And this is probably going to surprise nobody, but you had sort of a more measured initial reaction to that to me. So can you set up like the text you sent back with like read this part of his bio and then read that part of his bio and where you think everybody's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was very surprised, underwhelmed, frankly, but because of Rodolfo Borrell repeating the line names you wouldn't believe, And so I think it's important to surprising, yes, uninspiring, yes, but is it a bad hire? I think that's the question we need to ask, and I think we'll get into that a little now and then a little bit more after the first break. But if we anonymize Estevez's resume a little bit, and let's pretend we don't know his name, we don't know anything about him, and I'm going to read you the resume of this person. He's from Spain, speaks English really well, coached at a high-level Spanish La Liga academy, was the head coach of that team, Valencia's second team, for a year or two, was the interim head coach of Valencia for 2 games, was the assistant coach at a World Cup for a team who made it to the knockout rounds, has MLS experience, and made it to the playoffs 2 out of the 3 years that he coached an MLS team. If we just read those things, I think most people, not over the moon, because again, this is not, there are other profiles you could imagine that people would be more excited about. But I feel like if you just gave those bits of information to someone, they would be pretty positive about it. But whenever you tack on, he was just fired by FC Dallas, he worked under Berhalter, fairly or unfairly, that's going to change the perception of this drastically. And then Rodolfo Borrell did Nico Estevez no favors by the names you wouldn't believe thing. And so I think like that's what we can get into now and then a bit in the second segment of like, okay, let's take the baggage away from it. Let's look at what he is, what he isn't, and try to decide like how we really feel about it at that point.
I think that's fair. I think honestly, you reading that first part of that makes me think back to some of the qualifications that Rodo said he wasn't going to get into, and then I believe he ended up getting into a little bit in Spanish at the last press conference about what he was looking for in a coach. And a lot of those things that you just mentioned on the upside end of that are things that he talked about. It's like maybe it shouldn't be that surprising. I don't know how many people that aren't currently employed somewhere else necessarily fit that profile. So I was definitely, my initial reaction was very much, we didn't reach outside the Berhalter tree. This like seems like a selection of a coach that does not have ambition, just got fired by the local, a team just up the road. Like, so it was really negative early on for sure. I'm excited to see, like, we'll learn a little bit more and like the video maybe feel a little bit better and we'll see the press conference, and like I'm very willing to be wrong about that initial reaction, but that was without a doubt my initial reaction.
I think one thing that's worth kind of talking through is why, just like on the very surface, like why Borrell chose him, and why just like the surface level details of why it at least kind of makes sense. And it's because like he does play the style of soccer that Rodolfo Borrell wants to play. And like whenever Borrell said, Josh Wolff's one of the reasons I came here, we were like, okay, do you really mean that? Or are you just saying the things you're supposed to say? I think this hire is more proof that he, at least to a degree, meant that when he said it, that he's bringing in another guy who, we'll talk about the differences. There are differences, but a guy who wants to do more or less the same thing Josh Wolff did, coached under the same guy Josh Wolff did as an assistant. And so I think those are the reasons like why Borrell was looking at this guy. And maybe we'll find out more tomorrow about why he was the guy he finally chose. But there are some connections to why Borrell would be interested in someone like Estevez.
Yeah, don't you think also that unlike the way that Claudio Reyna built the initial Austin FC roster, like Rodo's also been building a team that fits this style of play too, which sort of locks him in some way to a coach that approaches the game in this way.
Yeah.
Because it's the way he wants his team to play. Like not that he's like putting himself in a corner for no reason, but this appears to be legitimately like the way he wants to play and the style of soccer he's looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess maybe let's take a quick break. And then we'll come back and we'll get into some more of the details around the hiring, and then maybe take stock of some of our positive feelings and some of our negative feelings, and see if we can decide where we fall on this whole thing.
I love it when we do like live therapy on this show about our soccer feelings, not our actual feelings. We'll never talk about those, but our soccer feelings we can unpack here between the two of us.
All right, hang tight. We'll be right back with more Moon Tower Soccer.
When no one is around.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of fee-free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balances. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts help you get more mileage from your everyday spending. And I'm going to dip into the copy that you read sometimes. In the next part, I had the chance to go to an event at Amplify's Esperanza branch last week. Great place. So it was like a little business gathering, good tacos, good coffee. It was talking about leading across diversity. And it was interesting to be in that room and be in the audience and not on the stage part of that. And also it was 9 a.m, so there was less beer than there was the last time that we were at the Esperanza branch.
That automatically docks it many points.
Yeah.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. To learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. All right, we are back. We're going to continue talking about the Nico Estevez hiring. Jeremiah, I think we kind of skipped over some of the details from the press release. What are some of the things that we were told in the press release that would be important to know? And then maybe we can get into what wasn't said in the press release also.
I like it. And I'm going to hit on largely just stuff from the press release because I always think it's interesting to read into what the club thinks is important to people. So start with the opening paragraph here. Austin FC today announced Nico Estevez as the club's new head coach. Estevez brings MLS Liga and international coaching experience to Austin. The 44-year-old bilingual native of Valencia, Spain, will join Austin FC after completing his duties with the U.S. men's national team during the upcoming November FIFA window. So we talked about his national team. I think people thought maybe you had an inside track or something generally when we were talking about his national team duties. The fact that you happened to mention him. I read a little hints of that. I'm like, I love that you think that Landon knows that, but
no, not at all. He legitimately is on Pochettino's staff for the U.S. national team and was at that game. And I thought it was interesting that he was there. That was the end of it.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that November FIFA window is November 11th to 19th. So we're about 3 weeks out from seeing him spend full time in Austin. Then next we get the classic quote that he probably didn't already write. Austin's vibrant city, fantastic music, food, culture, and most importantly, a fan base that's incredibly passionate. Passion is why I want to come here. Talks about wanting to know the supporters on a personal level. And then it kind of goes through his whole coaching bio and then mentions that there's going to be the press conference on the 29th, which is now tomorrow, which will be tomorrow, I guess today, for the people who are listening.
Tuesday.
On the first day at 2. Tuesday the 29th. I remember Rob Mickish telling me all the time, stop calling things today and tomorrow. Give the date, and everybody will understand.
Thanks, Rob.
So, yeah, that's kind of the highlights there.
One thing I thought was, just seemed really intentional and kind of almost weird in where it was placed is the word bilingual. That, I understand why they're doing it. They're really pushing that. And I think it is an important thing, but I just thought it was funny, that was one of the first things they said about him. And if I were Nico Estevez reading about it, it's really? That's the first adjective you're going to use about
That's all I've
me?
done. Yeah.
I learned a second language. Cool. And then another thing that is not in there is how long his contract is for. Because I believe we got that with Josh Wolff when he was hired.
And we definitely got that when he was extended. Right.
Yeah, so one or the other, maybe both. I'm not really sure, but that's interesting to see that. And he's probably not a guy who could demand huge money and a super long contract at this moment. So who knows how long it actually is? I would guess it would be 2 to 3 years with maybe like options or something by the club, but I really have no clue how long these contracts normally are for MLS coaches.
Yeah, I thought the other thing I thought was interesting, again, out of that right before the bilingual native, is the fact that he's 44, so he's actually younger than Josh Wolff. And I feel like so much of the time spent on talking about Josh Wolff is like from Burrell and everybody's like, oh, he's a young coach, he's a new coach, blah, blah, blah. But, the fact that Estevez has a pretty long coaching track record at this point, at his age, I think it's an interesting contrast to Wolff, too. I feel like almost everything
absolutely.
they emphasize is a contrast to Josh Wolff. And I don't know if that was on purpose or what.
It seems on purpose.
It seems intentional, right? Yeah.
And then one other thing, I'm not sure if maybe you already said this, so I apologize, but he's going to join after the next international window. So he's going to stay with the national team. I mean, he's in Austin now, but he's going to be with the national team during the next FIFA window, which is the second week of November. And then he's going to be in Austin full time, which is great timing, honestly. We were concerned about getting the coach in soon enough to be able to give input on player renewals, like the guys who are on the bubble, any new player signings, and then just kind of get acclimated and kind of get started as soon as possible. I think this timing is great from that measure. So it's good to know that he's going to be here soon and not January and be scrambling to get everything ready in time.
Yeah, because if I remember right, all those renewals or the announcements about who's going to get renewed or whatever, they all have to come by like the 27th. So one would expect he's providing input now, and that there's not going to be any challenge for Austin to be able to meet that date, which is something Burrell touched on a little bit in his end-of-season press conference.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dig into some of the pros and cons of this hire. So positive things. First off, I'll say he seems much more likable than Josh Wolff. I don't know that I would call him just like an extremely charismatic character, but he comes across as pretty thoughtful and kind. By all accounts, players really like him. And if Phil West had 2 articles out this week where he talks to some members of the media in Dallas, which, as much as we like to trash on Dallas, and there are many reasons to, there are a handful of guys there covering the team who are really smart. I specifically, as soon as I heard about this, I tuned into Buzz Carrick from Third Degree. Steve Davis wrote an article or shared an article about that he wrote whenever Estevez was fired, and kind of went through what he thought happened there. But a lot of these people were saying, like, by all accounts, players liked him even by the point he got fired. The players still backed him, still really liked him, still really respected him. There's a Jeff Carlisle piece on ESPN that I read today about Yunus Musa, and Musa and Carlisle mentioned, like, Nico Estevez and the connection to Valencia are a big reason why Yunus Musa ended up joining the U.S. men's national team. Valencia called Nico whenever they signed Yunus and said, hey, we've got this player who has a U.S. passport. Do you know who he is? And nobody knew who he was. And so Nico starts calling him. They develop a friendship. And by the time Yunus is in his first camp, he's been on the phone every other week with Nico for months at that point. And so, like, one of the best young talents in the U.S. national team pool is thanks to Nico Estevez and his link to Valencia. And then, like, if you look in you talked about the announcement video and the, like, accompanying post, they're being very intentional about saying, like, he loves the fans. He wants to come and talk to the fans. And to their credit, tomorrow after the press conference, there's going to be an event for supporters groups to come and meet him and talk to him. And, like, I know you expressed some cynicism about whether or not any of this is real or he wants to do it. And I agree. Like, it does seem like a cynical, or at the very least strategic thing to do, to say, like, oh, the fans didn't really like the last guy, so let's do everything we can to endear him to the fans as soon as we can, which I think is 100% true. But it comes down to the fact that if you put this guy in front of fans, I think most of them are going to quite like him.
Yeah, and that's I would like to. I appreciated the characterization as strategic and not cynical. And the last part of it, like they definitely get it, and I did. I think maybe it was to you or somebody. I was like, "Oh, this is just like when Josh Wolff brought me pizza at Oscar Blues," but I don't really remember him actually hanging around and talking to anybody or anything either. I think there was like Josh brought in some Double Days pizza that we played a song and then he left. So I'm really interested in how he connects with the media tomorrow, how, like what the interaction is with the fans. Like, while my initial reaction was, no, not super enthusiastic. I mean, it is a guy that led Dallas to a third place finish in 2022 in the West. Made the playoffs again last year. So I'm willing to be wrong for my initial reaction to the announcement of this coach.
Yeah, you mentioned the first year that he was in Dallas, the huge point swing from 2021 to 2022 when he came and took over. And I mentioned Steve Davis's article that I think a lot of people have read by now. If not, I'll try to link that in the show notes. It's a great read. I think Steve Davis is super smart. We had him on the show one time last year, I believe. But one thing that was really encouraging to me that he writes about in this article are that, and he cited, like, I think Kevin Morris had an exchange with him on Twitter, and Steve went on to say that this was the main reason why FC Dallas had such a big swing in points from that year to the next year. It was because Estevez came in and fixed their defensive shape, fixed their rest defense, and just drastically improved their transition defense. And so they were a pretty stingy team defensively while being pretty dynamic in their counter pressing and being able to kind of break and score off of those moments. Austin got better in transition defense this year, still not great, and were absolutely terrible in the 3 preceding years. So it would be excellent if he could come here and do the same thing. And like I've heard other people say this, and I think it's true, that I think on the back line, Austin is more talented at this point than FC Dallas was in 2024. So if he can come in and maybe even add 1 or 2 more pieces, or just have a better structure in front of these guys, I think Austin's defense could drastically improve. And it wasn't, like, as far as goals allowed, it was not terrible this year. But I think there's a lot of things as far as game state, rest defense, where you win the ball on the field, that could improve. And I think he's a guy who can do that and has done that in this league for a team that's not so different from this one right now.
I mean, you can't necessarily count on Brad Stuver to have more saves in a season than any goalkeeper has had in the last 20 years every year, which I feel like has a lot to do with how the numbers did not look bad for Austin this season after they had looked so bad in years before. So maybe let's talk about, I mean, we've mentioned at a high level why the initial reaction wasn't super great from, I think, either of us, or, like, I've seen a lot of criticism on the various parts of the internet where you see a lot of criticism. And I think, the number one thing, I think we covered this, right? It comes down to, like, somebody who was just fired from FC Dallas, just up the road. I think somebody that Austin fans like to believe that Austin has greater ambition than FC Dallas. I feel like that's a big point against him in that part. And then, I mean, how much of this just comes down to the fact that his first job in the States was in Columbus, and that he's part of the Berhalter family? Like, is that the bigger overall? Like, is that the bigger dig on him? Maybe that you either from you or from what you hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, and for both fair and unfair reasons. I think the unfair ones is just for what, like, I still don't think Greg Berhalter is that bad of a coach. I think he's probably quite good in a lot of contexts. And so that's where I'll say it's maybe a little bit unfair. But on the fair side of it is, whenever Dallas was at their worst this year before he got fired, it looked pretty similar to when Josh Wolff's teams looked at their worst, where they were slow, ponderous, ineffective, toothless in the attack, and then also did not have great defenders or a lot of, like, ground covering defensive midfielders that could, like, kind of counterbalance that and make them super strong defensively either. And so, like, it's just the thing of, my definition of Wolff ball, trying to do too much with too little. And whenever he had too little, he didn't know what to do. And that was another point of Steve Davis's article, is that whenever Estevez came to Dallas, he had the solution to the particular problems that they had in that moment. But whenever those problems changed and he was presented with a different set of problems, that he didn't have the answers for them. And to be fair, a lot of the problems were just a bunch of injuries to all of their best players. And so, like, you can give him some slack for that, but he still did not know what to do with that team and did not show any improvement whenever all of that happened. So Jesus Ferreira, Paxton Pomacall, Alain Velasco, Sebastian Lletget, Paul Arriola, Asier Iaramendi, and several others all either had long-term or frequent injuries, dips in form, or all of the above during the 2023-2024 season. It's just like whenever those guys were out, he just did not know what to do with them, and that team did not know what to do, and they looked a little bit too much like Austin FC for comfort. And I think that's the concern, is that when you hire a Berhalter guy, you don't have the horses to actually play that kind of soccer. You get what Austin has had for the last few years.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on that because I was just going back through the team page today for FC Dallas, and I was like, this team on paper was super talented, but it does come down to who can stay on the field. And while Burrell's done a good job of roster building, and I expect that next year's team is going to be better than this year's team on paper, this is still not going to be what the 2023 or 2022 or 2023 FC Dallas squad was if they were healthy, right? There's just no way to add that much more talent in the attack, so he's going to have to do more with less, at least for this season, if Austin's going to be successful.
Yeah, 100%. And so at the end of the day, I view this hiring as Rodolfo Burrell putting the burden of this club's success on his own shoulders, and that he believes that with the right players, the right support around him, Nico Estevez can be successful at implementing this style of play. I don't believe we have all those players at this exact moment. I don't think Rodolfo Burrell thinks we have all those players at this moment either. But now it's on him to deliver. Like he invited a lot of pressure on himself with the things he said in the last year, and then invited more pressure on himself with this hire in the context of those things he said. And so now it's on him to deliver. Like, put your money where your mouth is and bring in the missing pieces that Estevez is going to need to bring Austin FC out of the depths.
So you think this is well, obviously this seems like a very self-confident man. And so you're saying this is a hire is an extension of that, right? Because I feel like if he'd have brought in an assistant coach from somewhere in Europe, like we talked about and Goss talked about and others have, like he probably would have gotten more grace, at least from the fan base and from the media, because he'd be like, oh, look, he's trying something creative and different, and this like lives up to this prediction about names you wouldn't believe and stuff like that. But by making this particular move, he's really committed to, I know what I'm doing, and this team is going to succeed because of my own talent, which is a pretty bold position to take.
It's bold, but something that got me thinking about this is David Goss on Soccer Wise today on Monday. They talked about this hiring, and we're talking about the kind of the structure that has become more typical in modern soccer clubs and a lot of successful soccer clubs, where the sporting director, technical director, CS, whatever you want to call them, the Burrell position is the one kind of setting the tone for the team, dictating the style that he wants them to play. The coach comes in and he's there to train the players, pick the starting 11. And so again, you can see this as bravado and as arrogance, saying like, I know what I'm doing. If you just do what I tell you to do, we're going to be fine. But I think that could be seen as like why he picked someone like Estevez, where he's coming in, can get a fresh start with someone who is from a background where that's kind of the way you do things. Like that's been the norm in Spain for a long time now. And that's where Estevez comes from. And so he's not going to like buck against the idea that, oh, the technical director is the guy kind of calling all the shots and I'm here to do what he wants me to do. That's not like a power trip in his eyes. It's like, no, that's the way successful clubs do things. And so, yeah, I'm happy to do that. And so, I kind of see it as maybe part and parcel of why Estevez was hired. Whereas, just for lack of a better example, Greg Berhalter was rumored to only wanting to go to teams where he would have say over player decisions. And so Berhalter, and then probably a lot of other managers who would have wanted that kind of control or a bit more say in who they were playing, what kind of style they were doing. And I imagine that wasn't going to fly with Burrell in the model that he wants to do.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That fits with everything that we've seen and heard from him. And I think we talked about this when there was the end of the season presser, where it's like everything he said, he's like followed through on. Like does not leave a lot of doubt. So I don't have any reason to believe that he's approaching this any differently. Do you want any more coach talk? You want to move on to some of the other news?
One more just kind of bullet point on that last point is that we've both been told by different sources that there's been some turnover in the Austin FC staff, both just like front office administrative staff, and then more recently in the medical staff. And so it does seem like Rodolfo Burrell is slowly but surely reforming this club in his image. And so he wants things done the way that he wants them done. And some of that is bringing in more Spanish folks. And maybe that's another reason
that seems to be a big part of it. Yeah.
Nico Estevez is being brought in, but for whatever reason and whatever form, he does seem to be kind of like, okay, we're starting fresh. Like, we're going to bring in my people at every level of the club. And maybe some of the folks that are already here can conform to that, and that's great. But if the ones who can't, like, either they'll disappear on their own or I'll get rid of them. But we're like, everyone in this building is going to be kind of working under my vision. And it really seems like he's started that, truly started that transformation, like now, this off season.
Yeah, I guess that will follow up in the one question I'd written I wasn't going to talk about. Was this just Roto's call? Because we saw a lot of, when this came out, it's like, oh, well, it's just pre-cord exists. You know, it's showing his love for the Berhalter system, and so he just found another guy that fits the mold. But to your point on like the overhaul of the staff, that was like a level of authority that Claudio Reyna never had, or if he had it, he never exercised it. Like, I felt like his entire football operation was kind of cobbled together from the most interesting names they could find or whatever. But like, there seems to be a real strong vision under Burrell. And so,
I mean,
there's sink or fall on that.
Like the link to Precourt with Estevez is impossible to ignore, but it's also hard to imagine a reality where Berhalter is going to let Precourt tell him who he's going to hire.
Roto,
as the
not
head
Berhalter.
coach. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's hard to imagine a reality where Rodolfo Burrell is going to let Anthony Precourt tell him who he can hire as the head coach, and would be okay with that, and would still be here or would have come here in the first place if he did not have the freedom to do that whenever the position was open.
All right, well, let's move on to what in a normal offseason week would have been the biggest news of the week. We finally got the second, something we talked about last week on the show, hoping to have, and maybe we'd have to talk about. We got the fall 2024 salary guide. The reason it's interesting for Austin is it now includes the players that came in the middle of the season. And I think you had a really strong tweet about like some of the best players for this club that came in on great numbers. So maybe just go over the new news.
Yeah, that is the biggest news from this, from an Austin FC lens, is Osman Bukhari, Mikhail Dessler, and Alexander Svatok. Their salaries are all listed on here. Bukhari's on $1 million, which is quite low for a guy of his profile. Mikhail Dessler on $500K, and then Svatok on $300K. And just the glimpse that we've seen of these guys on the field so far, these all feel like extreme bargains to me, especially if you compare them to other guys who are currently on the roster or guys who have been on the roster in the past. Like Ruben Gabrielson was on like $950K or something. He was good, but I think Svatok will be on a similar level and fill a similar gap to him on this team whenever he gets fully integrated for less than a third of the money. Mikael Dessler, $500K. Like, y'all know how much I love him. I would pay much more than that for him. I'm glad we don't have to, but great value on Dessler, especially given that we didn't pay a transfer fee for him. So that is his budget hit. Like, transfer fees get prorated into their salary cap hit. And so because we didn't pay a transfer fee for Dessler, it is $500K. There is no additional money on. There would be bonuses or whatever that will get factored in, but there's no transfer fee being factored into how much he hits the salary cap. One thing that I've seen a few people either like wondering about Bukhari is because he came in mid-season, if you bring in someone mid-season, their budget hit is only half of their salary. And I saw a lot of people thinking that means the number listed on the Players Association salary guide is already cut in half. I don't believe that to be true. If you look back, like Leo Messi joined in the summer as well. His full salary was listed on the first salary drop after that. So I think Osman Bukhari's full salary is $1 million. I saw other people speculating that because he's only on $1 million, that we could buy him down with TAM and open yet another designated player spot. That is also not true because of what I was saying before. That's the transfer fee gets factored into this. His transfer fee was reported to be $7 million. That makes it a non-starter for TAMable players. And so like, yeah, I think that's a conversation to be had too, is like, for a designated player, should we even care what they make? Because they're going to hit at a fixed number. That is I don't know, 700 some odd thousand this coming season. That's all that hits. So like, why should we care what it is? I think the answer is Anthony Precourt is paying that money, and the less money he's paying this guy, maybe the more money he's willing to pay the next guy Burrell goes after.
Yeah, I think that's the real reason why anybody should care about it. And I mean, I guess there's a possibility, since this is the first year of the deal and we don't know how the deal's structured, that he could be making more next year too. That maybe because it's only a half season, he signed like a lower deal for this one. Biru was $200,000 also, so that's like four guys who have been real values. And I love that Rodolfo Burrell likes a round number, because all four of those guys are exactly to the dollar. This is not one of these, Ethan Finley on $262,500 kind of deals. Like they're a nice round number, which feels very like European and precise of him. I think too.
Metric system.
Yes, but man, I mean, yeah, it seems like nothing but good deals, and it seems like nothing but looking forward to maybe him being able to find players. I mean, he seems to do a good job finding players and value in places that other MLS clubs are not looking, and so far that has worked.
Yeah, and also not biting or like not caving on what he thinks is a bad deal, which seemed like probably happened a lot before, and I think happens in other MLS clubs as well, just based on guys we've seen come and not work out, or kind of handcuff teams for long-term contracts that ended up not being that good. He said he wanted Dessler at a time before, did not get it for the number he wanted, was going to have to pay a transfer fee. He said, okay, we'll wait until summer. And so it's frustrating for how long we've had to wait for some of these guys to come in, but long-term, this will pay off, and this will make the salary budget and the roster put it in a much more healthy state by even the end of like this offseason, but even more so by the next offseason.
Yeah, because when you go through and sort the player salaries, like, top to bottom, I mean, his guys are all pretty efficient, but there's some bad deals in here too, right? If you look at, I mean, even like a guy like Julio, I mean, it's not a terrible deal, but I feel like that there's no way that Roto would have paid Julio Cascante what Julio Cascante is making right now, $700,000. Like, that doesn't seem like the kind of deal he would make. So, while sure, it's not the worst deal on the roster. Like, there was definitely a tendency to overpay for average talent in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have some contract extensions. Like it was mentioned before, we had one when we recorded last week. We got 3 more during the course of last week. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and discuss those extensions and, again, decide how we feel about them.
Okay. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage real estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com.
Moon Tower Soccer's premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country. And this is going to cause me now to bring up my new political take, which is once you vote, you should not get any more political texts or emails. There's a way to do that. Like that would be a incentive for early voting. If I could just, like, as soon as I early voted, all the political spam stopped. Like, everybody would vote on the first day of early voting. That's my new take. Make that happen, McGuire Woods.
They still want your money, Jeremiah. They still want your money. McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities and is proud to support Moon Tower Soccer and support Austin FC's march to the 2025 playoffs. Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. All right, we are back. We're going to get into some contract extensions. After that, we'll maybe talk about some other player movement rumors, and then maybe the report from Paul Tenorio that MLS might be changing the MLS schedule. But first, let's jump into those contract extensions. So, as we said before, we got the Jader Obrian announcement last Monday. That is 2+1 deal, so the next 2 years and an option on the 3rd year. We also got news about Owen Wolff. That is a 3+1, so he's guaranteed through 2027, and then with an option in 2028. I want to come back and talk about what this means for his roster status, but let's put a pin in that. We also got Brendan Hines-Ike. That is a 1+1 deal. He was on an option year. And so what they did is essentially said, okay, we'll renew the contract, give you that option year plus another option year. Diego Rubio in the same boat, 1+1. When they had an option to give, they gave him a new contract with one guaranteed year and another option year. How do we feel about these? I think Diego Rubio is the only one that I'm a little bit concerned about. The other 3 I'm pretty happy with.
Yeah, I started with kind of the last 2 and curious about him, just like from a mostly from an age thing. But I mean, Hines-Ike's still only 29, so like I could take a 1+1 on him. So I'm less concerned about that than I thought. Yeah, Rubio. The Rubio deal for me, if you ignore the $1 million Giassi Sardes-sized hole in the Austin FC roster, I mean, Rubio's a serviceable player. You don't expect a ton out. You kind of know what you're going to get. You know, if he was made $350 this year, if he's like your second center forward option on $350 that can, score 5 or 6 goals and play part of most games, then I'm totally okay with this deal. It's the Zardes factor. It's the fact there's no other 9 is the thing that concerns me. Like, I remember how much Austin paid the Dancing Bear like 2 years ago, but it was a decent chunk of money to like come in at the end of the game. So like close to 300, I think, if I remember right, for Will Bruin. So this isn't terrible.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, who knows what this negotiation looked like? And it's important to point out, these extension numbers, as far as salary goes, were not included in the MLSPA salary drop. The salaries are as of September 13th. And so we won't find out what these guys are making on these new deals until next spring. And so until that point, I think it's all speculation, and it's hard to say exactly how we feel about them. But I could see a reality where they tell Rubio, okay, we're not going to pick up that extension at the number that was the option year at the number that was agreed before. But if you're willing to take a pay cut, we'll give you another 1+1 and come back for cheaper. that would be an outcome that I would be quite happy with. Still a little bit concerned about senior roster spots. We don't have that many. Like best case scenario, it's going to be like most likely scenario, it's going to be 2 or 3 senior roster spots free. Absolute miracle scenarios like 5 senior roster spots free. And Rubio is most likely still going to be taking up one of those spots. And so I'm hoping that re-signing him means that they believe they can free up some other ones and they're okay with keeping him on there. But as of right now, we don't have many, and we don't have many clear paths to more. And so that's what it concerns me there.
Well, let's talk about the Owen extension. I mean, I think everybody agrees that keeping Owen Wolff around is a good
Absolutely.
thing. And you know, the at his age, the length is obviously not concerning, but he is a homegrown and was on the supplemental roster. Is that right?
That's right. He this last season he was on. This is so boring. I'm falling asleep even saying it. He was on like spots 29 and 30 on the supplemental roster, which I think are reserved for homegrown players. And so if you're homegrown and supplemental, your salary does not count towards the salary budget, which is really big for homegrowns who play as much as Owen does. Like to get that many minutes out of a guy and it's not counting towards that budget is huge. Where this could affect that is depending on how big his raise is in this contract extension, that could change. And so what was his salary this year according to the
$110,000.
Oh, the new one is 110
and then 123 total compensation.
Yeah, 123 guaranteed compensation. So if you look at like what needs to happen for him to remain on the supplemental roster, the maximum amount, and I'll save all of the explanation because again, it's very boring. But as a supplemental roster player, the maximum money you can make in the 2025 season, so the senior minimum salary is $104,000. As a homegrown, there's something called a homegrown subsidy where you can pay them $125,000 on top of that. So all that to say, you can, if your eyes glazed over, ignore all of that. The important part is that if Owen Wolff makes $229,000 or less, he can remain on the supplemental roster as a homegrown player and not count towards the salary budget. If he makes more than that, then he will have to take up a senior roster spot and his salary will then start counting towards the salary budget. So that number is important, especially this year. I would guess, and like what I hope is happening is that they gave him something like what I'll call the Reggie Cannon deal. So Reggie Cannon was a star for FC Dallas as a homegrown player. I think he was probably making more than what Owen is now, and his stature in the league was bigger at that point. But there was a string of players that were upset that they were not getting sold to Europe at their peak in MLS. Reggie Cannon and his agent saw that, expressed those concerns to FC Dallas. FC Dallas gave him a deal that escalated significantly every year that they kept him. And so, okay, first year is pretty team friendly. Second year is still not terrible, but fairly team friendly. Once you get past that, the numbers went up drastically. And so what that is the player saying, I'll play ball for the next 2 years and you keep me here. I'll keep developing and I'll take a salary that is friendly to you. But the longer you keep me, the more you have to pay me. And so if you're not going to sell me, you're not going to move me on, I at least want a salary that represents my worth to you. And so I would guess and kind of hope that it's something like that, where he can stay on the supplemental roster for at least this year, hopefully even next year. But then after that, it would start to escalate where, okay, is he worth it to you? Like either sell him or pay him what he's worth to be on this team. But you can't not choose either of those things.
Yeah, and that would make sense for Owen's camp to have some kind of deal like that. So with these moves, now we've got. Let's just talk about who else is still out there, who's undecided. So these are going to be players that are have an option year past 2024. So Ethan Finley is one, made $262,000. We talked about last year. Matt Hedges, Johan Valencia. Then I think two interesting ones, just in long terms, are Danny Pereira and Alex Ring, both with options of some sort. And then on the supplemental, we have Matt Barsano, who I believe has already moved. I think I showed a picture of his the moving truck outside of his house.
Yeah.
So he's already said goodbye to Austin. Jimmy Farker-Loon, I don't think that he's too much to worry about. And then Hector Jimenez is the only player who's he's just out of contract, and I think everybody expects he's going to retire. So from among that first group of five, who do you see staying or going?
I mean, I think Valencia's gone 100%.
Same.
He's too expensive for what he gives you. Matt Hedges, I would guess, is also for sure gone. I don't see a reality where what he's worth to this team is what he could probably get elsewhere. So I think he's almost certainly gone.
He gets caught in the numbers game too, right? Because he's your fourth center back at this point, probably.
Right? Yeah. I mean, ideally, he's the easiest. There are others who you could say maybe he's better than or more useful than on the field, but as far as contracts go, he's the easiest one to get rid of right now. So I feel like he's probably gone. Ethan Finley is one where I would love if we could get him on the Hector Jimenez deal, where he's like, I like it here. I'm going to stick around and take a supplemental roster spot for a couple of seasons. I don't have to move. You don't have to count me towards the senior roster spot or salary budget, and everyone wins. That would be ideal. I'm not sure Ethan's going to settle for that. Hopefully he will. Hopefully he'll be happy with that. I'm not sure he would be happy with that. I think he could probably get more than senior minimum elsewhere if he was willing to move, but I'm hoping they can keep him on a club-friendly deal. Danny Pereira is going to be here. I think the matter is, okay, he has an option year. Are they just going to straight pick up his option, or will it be an extension like we've seen from some of these other guys? But one way or another, he's going to be here. Roto put an asterisk on it. I think we could get an offer or a sale or whatever. Roto would listen, but we're not going to let him walk is the main point.
Yeah, and the other part of that, I feel is he'll listen, but it's going to have to be an offer that makes sense, right? He's not just going to take any deal to get him out of here, to get Danny gone, but it's got to be one that makes a lot of sense for the club. On Finley, I wonder, does his Players Association status matter? I feel in terms of him wanting to set, to set an example for players, and how players can advocate for themselves, he's going to be less likely to take a hometown deal than the average person off the street. He's more likely to maximize what he can make because of that connection.
Maybe. I mean, he'll know his rights and he'll know what he can make, but that doesn't change his priorities. If his priorities are to maximize earnings, then staying here is probably not going to be the right option. But if his priority is to keep his family stable, to stay in one spot for more than a couple of years, maybe he will take it. But from a teammate perspective, I was talking to Mike Crignola about this, that having as a teammate to have leadership from the players union on your team, that's great. That's such an asset for guys to have, especially new guys to the league, or guys like Irvin Torres and Michael Burton coming up new, to have that guy to just come and ask questions and get advice from. That's huge. I don't know that Burrell cares about that, but his teammates surely will.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You have to have these kind of glue guys too. So this leaves Alex Ring that we haven't talked about, but also I feel we've talked about Alex Ring a lot. Is there do we have any new insights on where we might see Alex Ring in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, we've said what we want. We want him back, but on a much lower number. So whenever you were tipped off about the Estevez hiring, I was reaching out to folks trying to get that confirmed, and could not do that. Did not get it confirmed. Everyone I talked to was like, "No, that sounds crazy. I don't think Burrell's going to hire Estevez." But I did get, I guess, kind of an indication that there is likely not another auto trigger on Alex Ring's contract, meaning that Burrell can go into these negotiations on his term, and Ring is not just automatically opted into this next year. So that's great news if that's correct. Yeah, I mean, hopefully he wants to stay for cheaper, but there's, again, what are his priorities? Does he want to stay here and kind of have a home for a while, or does he want to maximize his earning? And I would respect either decision, but don't know where his head is.
Yeah, we're not that man's head and cannot predict to be that. So let's just go through a couple contract. Well, I guess one of them's not really a rumor. So John Kolmich is not a U22 anymore. Is that correct?
Right. He got that extension mid-season, which that's another still kind of baffling one for as little as he played this year. But he is going to be on the senior roster, not U22 as of 2025.
Which leaves Austin with 0 U22 players for 2025. So it'll be interesting to see the choice that Austin makes given the DP versus U22 roster construction issue, or maybe a whole new set of options will come out during the offseason given the way MLS works things. So yeah, that I feel like that makes him less valuable, right? Given his minutes and contract status.
In MLS, yes.
Yeah, that's
it
what I
does.
mean, in MLS.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that it hurts his transfer value outside of the league. So that's still to be seen whether or not that's the plan and if there are actually takers for him. But in MLS, it absolutely makes him a bigger detriment to this team than he was this season.
Yeah, and then we also get this. This is far into the rumor part of this. So Julio Cascante now lists himself as an athlete and not at Austin FC in his Instagram bio. Does this mean he's on the way out?
Potentially. I mean, yeah. There was also a post. His most recent post was just a green and black heart as the caption, and then photos of him in an Austin FC jersey. And then if you scroll over, the very last photo is him waving as he's walking off the field. And so there's enough plausible deniability baked in there that where maybe it's like, thanks for another great season, we'll see you next year. But could very easily read it as, thanks, Austin, see you never.
Yeah, and so and the reason that
for nothing, see you never.
Thanks for nothing, see you never. Yeah. The reason that that's like not necessarily a known is because he is under contract through 2025. So it would have to be, I guess, most likely a trade, but in the league is how he ends up somewhere else.
A trade just seems so unlikely to me given his salary. So, I mean, I want to preface this by saying I really like Julio Cascante as a person. I like his presence. You talked about glue guys, like as a glue guy on this team, as a good example for young guys coming up, just seems like a really good dude. But if we could find someone to give us an asset of any kind to get him off of this roster, I think it would be a good idea. And I would be pretty happy about it from a soccer and salary cap standpoint. So if Burrell can get that deal done, like I think that would be excellent news from a sporting standpoint.
Yeah, Bruce Arena's in San Jose now, so maybe is that where the finding homes for ex Austin FC defenders? Does that become that becomes the best option? I don't know.
That's honestly a pretty good shout, Jeremiah.
Do you want to talk about this potential schedule change here for a few minutes?
Yeah, this is very interesting. So I think we mentioned that at the top or earlier in the show, but Paul Tenori is reporting for The Athletic that MLS is considering switching up their schedule and going to a more European fall to spring schedule as opposed to the like calendar year that Austin or that MLS does currently. This has been a thing that a lot of people have said should happen for a long time. The logistics of it are complicated. And so it's going to be hard to do. I don't know how they necessarily get it done, but it seems like a thing that they're seriously talking about. We heard, I think, via The Athletic earlier this year that a lot of the CSO sporting director types in the league are really starting to call out this schedule as a limiting factor into how they're able to bring in players from other leagues. That our mid-season window being Europe's main window and vice versa is a huge detriment to bringing in players, and that lots of sporting directors have said, no, I've missed out on multiple players for that reason alone. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I would welcome it from that standpoint. Selfishly, as someone who lives in Austin, I would very much welcome going to
not
fewer
playing in
games
July
in the middle of the summer. I think one of the complicated things geographically is the northern teams having to play more winter games. There's ways around it. There's ways to figure it out. They're not easy. They're probably not fair. But it's probably a useful thing to do. And again, selfishly, I would welcome it.
Yeah, the other part of that, the window, the midseason window is not even really the midseason window either at this point. Now, part of that's like the fault of the Leagues Cup, but your midseason window is 2/3 of the way through the year, which becomes very hard to integrate players and make any kind of difference, which is a reason to go ahead and make the change. And then also you align with all the FIFA dates, these weird like MLS teams playing each missing 4 players because they decided to have a match during a FIFA window. So that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it just you're going to have a half season or like an 18-month season or something at some point in order to pull that off, which is
I was thinking about that.
It all
The
goes
transition.
to 2026, right? I mean, that's the thing
Right.
about, like, because if you take the break for that World Cup, then you do, I don't know, you just have like an apertura and then play the World Cup and then start the next season up when it's over. Yeah, the transition is going to be something of a nightmare, but that's always going to be the case with the transition. Like, there's no way around that.
Right. But we've seen that MLS is willing to do weird stuff sometimes. So let's have a short season, a super short season where like we don't even play everyone twice or no Eastern Conference games or something to like shorten it. And then maybe have MLS is back again.
I was just going to say, yeah, but I've got the MLS is back poster on the wall behind me from the first one. Yeah, maybe you get another one of those.
And then, just like bridge that gap to the World Cup and then start the next season after the World Cup. Like, that is a way you could do it. And MLS is not afraid of being weirdos.
Yeah. So, and then the other part of that is, do you have like an apertura and clausura to?
I don't want to.
You don't want that?
I just really don't like it. I was kind of getting on board with it, and then I heard several people make the point that if you're trying to reach American sports fans and get more American sports fans to pay attention to this league, the last thing you want to do is make the rules more complicated to understand.
That's fair.
And by doing that, like doing apertura clausura format, I think it is making it more difficult to comprehend for the average American sports fan. And so I think you just kind of do it like Germany does this. They'll just take a huge break in the winter.
Yeah.
And then come back, pick up the season where you left off and pretend like nothing changed. And I think that's totally doable. I don't think that's that weird.
Yeah, and then that's where your midseason window is too, right? Your midseason transfer window aligns with when you're taking time off. So yeah, I'm all for it. I think in terms of like soccer in the world, it would be a big step forward for MLS. I do think there's like geographic things to consider, but it's 105 in Austin in the summer right now, and they're playing games. So like that's the weather is already an issue,
and that number's not getting lower.
No, exactly.
Anything else, Jeremiah? Are we done?
No, I think we're done. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. I guess we're looking forward to the press conference. So like whatever comes out of that, it's interesting. We will definitely cover on next week's show. So expect next week's show to also be coach heavy, and then we'll see what else comes after that.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Come find us on Twitter at LVHero87, JBentley_ATX, and then at Moon Tower Soccer on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Looking forward to see what else comes out of the Nico Estevez Charm Tour this week. And then I'm going to go ahead and throw my hat over the fence on this one to get myself to do it. We've got some stuff that we want to sell on our online store that I've not finished building yet. But there's a lot of like Patreon merch from years past that we're going to put out there. And then also a few pieces of new merch that we had created, and then some shirts that we still have. So I think we kind of want to slowly work on decreasing our current inventory and then have some plans for what merch is going to look like going forward after that. But I'm going to get that live and online soon.
Okay, and Jackson and I can come help. We're going to stack it deep and sell it cheap. Yeah, Jackson and I can come help you with that whenever we're ready to do it.
Okay, deal. All right, well, thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with coverage of the Nico Estevez press conference, and then whatever Austin FC news breaks between now and then, who knows what that will be. Until then, I'm Landon Cottam.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Think for nothing, you never.
La gente
Oh my God.